I just had this utter sensation of disbelief, and I was saying, they can't be gone, she can't be gone, she must be there. Kate was screaming hysterically that she'd checked and she was gone and someone had taken her. You're just thrown into this absolute nightmare. Terrifying ordeal. I think the worst thing that could happen to her.
Imagine putting your child to bed in a quiet, familiar room. You're on vacation. The night is calm. You return to the table where your friends are waiting, believing everything is just fine. But less than an hour later, your daughter is gone, without a sound, without a trace. That's what Kate and Jerry McCann told the world happened on the night of May 3rd, 2007. But what if that story isn't true? What if there was no break-in, no intruder, no abduction? What if instead, Madeleine McCann died inside apartment 5A? And the truth was hidden not by a stranger, but by someone much closer. This is a case that has haunted the world for nearly 2 decades. A missing girl, global headlines, accusations, sympathy, and silence. But behind the official story lies a disturbing sequence of events, a timeline full of contradictions, vanished evidence, and the unmistakable scent of death. Today, I'll walk you through the darkest corners of this case, not to accuse, but to examine, not to judge, but to remember. Because sometimes the loudest cries are the ones never heard, and the most horrifying truths are the ones buried just steps away. Let's begin with the little girl at the center of it all. Madeleine Beth McCann was born on May 12, 2003, in Leicester, England. She was just a few weeks away from her 4th birthday when she vanished. With her wide blue-green eyes and a bright, curious smile, Madeleine was the kind of child people remembered. Her left eye was particularly unique. A deep, dark blue iris with a distinct brown mark near the pupil, a feature that would become iconic in global missing child posters. She was the eldest of 3 siblings, a protective big sister to her younger twin brother and sister, Sean and Emily. Her parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, both doctors, often described her as bright, talkative, and full of energy. Madeleine loved storybooks, especially ones about princesses. She adored cuddly toys and often slept with her favorite soft pink blanket. Vacation photos from the days leading up to her disappearance show a happy child running through sunlit cobblestone streets, sitting on her dad's shoulders, licking ice cream, smiling in oversized sunglasses. It was her first holiday in Portugal, and tragically, it would be her last. Madeleine's laughter once echoed across the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz, a small coastal town where British families came to unwind. She played by the pool, sang silly songs, and asked innocent questions, unaware of the shadows creeping into her story. She wasn't just a headline. She was a daughter, a sister, a little girl with a voice that would soon be replaced by silence. The loss of Madeleine didn't just shake her family, it shook the world. But before we examine the night she vanished, we must look closer at the environment she lived in, and what might have been missed. To the outside world, Kate and Jerry McCann were the image of a respectable British family. Both were successful physicians. Kate, a general practitioner, Jerry, a cardiologist. They lived in Rothley, a quiet village in Leicestershire, with their 3 young children, and appeared by most accounts to lead a stable, middle-class life. But behind that seemingly pristine image was a fragile routine, often tested by the demands of parenthood and careers. Raising 3 small children, including a set of energetic twins, came with exhaustion and stress. Those close to them described the McCanns as loving parents, but also as people under constant pressure, managing work-life balance in a home that was often chaotic. In late April 2007, the McCanns joined a group of 7 friends, many also doctors, on a vacation to the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz, Portugal. This group would become known as the Tapas 7, named after the on-site restaurant where they dined most nights. The plan was simple: relax, enjoy time with their children, and reconnect. But one key detail of that trip would become a lightning rod for scrutiny. Each night, the adults would leave their children asleep in nearby apartments while they dined together, rotating turns to check in periodically. For some, it was a harmless compromise. For others, it was a breach of basic parental responsibility. Regardless of how one sees it, this routine created a tragic window, one where silence was mistaken for safety. There were no known history of abuse, no legal troubles, no recorded interventions by authorities. But the system of nightly childcare relied heavily on trust and on the assumption that nothing would go wrong. Yet, something did. On the night of May 3rd, 2007, something irreversible happened inside apartment 5A. Something that would fracture lives, stir global controversy, and ignite a storm of theories, speculation, and silence. May 3rd, 2007. The last night Madeleine McCann was ever seen alive. That evening, the McCanns followed their now familiar holiday routine. Around 8:30 p.m., they put their children to bed in apartment 5A, Madeleine in her bed, the twins in their cots. The adults then headed to the tapas restaurant just a short walk away, leaving their doors unlocked for easy access during their scheduled checks. At 9:00 p.m., family friend Matt Oldfield offered to check on the McCann children. He entered the apartment, glanced into the room, but did not see Madeleine. He later admitted he didn't fully enter the room. He didn't hear anything concerning. He returned to dinner and reported, all was fine. At 9:05 p.m., Jerry McCann did his own check. He claimed Madeleine was sleeping peacefully. The room appeared normal. But between that moment and 10:00 p.m., something went horribly wrong. At exactly 10:00 p.m., Kate McCann went to check on the children. She entered the apartment and discovered the unimaginable. Madeleine was gone. The window was open, the shutters raised, and the child's bed was empty. Kate screamed into the night, "They've taken her! Someone's taken her!" The alarm was raised, but nearly an hour had already passed since the last certain sighting of Madeleine, an hour lost to silence and assumptions. In the chaos that followed, strange details emerged. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no shattered glass. Yet the window had allegedly been opened by the intruder. Forensics later found no fingerprints, not even of the parents, no dirt, no trace of anyone climbing in or out, nothing. But that wasn't all. The patio door at the back of the apartment had been left unlocked. It led to a quiet garden path, unlit, unmonitored, and mere seconds from the apartment. A perfect escape route. Or a place to hide something. Or someone. Soon, testimonies began to conflict. Matt Oldfield said he didn't see Madeleine during his 9:00 p.m. check, but didn't raise an alarm. Jerry's 9:05 p.m. account claimed all was normal. Yet, between these 2 points, there is no witness who can confirm that Madeleine was still alive. This silent 55-minute gap became the most contested hour in the history of British true crime. Because in that time, something irreversible may have happened, not in the shadows of an abduction, but within the very walls of apartment 5A. What happened next would become one of the most criticized high-profile investigations in modern history. Portuguese police arrived shortly after 10:40 p.m. that night, but their response was delayed, confused, and deeply flawed. There was no immediate perimeter established, no forensic lockdown, and most critically, no search of the dark, overgrown area just beyond the back patio, a place only meters from the apartment. Within hours, the McCanns and their friends were giving statements. They insisted Madeleine had been abducted through the bedroom window, but investigators found no physical evidence to support that theory. No fingerprints, no forced entry, and no credible sightings of a stranger. Then came the dogs. British cadaver dogs, Eddie and Keela, were brought to the scene. Trained by the South Yorkshire Police, these dogs had worked on countless homicide cases. They were deployed inside apartment 5A weeks after the disappearance. Their response was immediate and chilling. Eddie, the cadaver dog, alerted in several places inside the apartment, behind the couch, near the wardrobe, and even to a piece of Kate McCann's clothing. Keela, trained to detect blood, signaled in the same locations. Forensic teams lifted tiles in the living room. Beneath them, they discovered biological traces that appeared to have been scrubbed, but not erased. Then came the Renault Scenic. The McCanns had rented the silver car 24 days after Madeleine disappeared. Both dogs alerted inside the trunk. Later, forensic tests revealed a 15 out of 19 DNA marker match to Madeleine. Not enough to convict, but statistically significant. More alarmingly, both dogs reacted to the key fob of the same vehicle, as if it too had carried a silent trace of what happened. The Portuguese police grew suspicious. Questions multiplied. Why did the McCanns refuse to answer key inquiries? Why had Kate McCann declined to respond to 48 direct questions in a formal interview? Why did Jerry's phone records go silent during the crucial 90-minute window on May 3rd? No calls, no texts, no GPS activity. Then came the eyewitness accounts. Jane Tanner, a friend of the McCanns, reported seeing a man carrying a child in pajamas around 9:15 p.m. near the apartment. But her account was dismissed as vague. Martin Smith, an Irish tourist, offered a different story. Around 10 p.m., he and his family saw a man carrying a blonde girl down toward the beach. Her head hung limp. She was barefoot. Days later, Martin saw footage of Jerry McCann carrying one of his twins at the airport. He told police, "I'm 80% sure it was the same man I saw that night." Still, there would be no arrests, no trial, no charges. Instead, the McCanns launched a media campaign, hired high-profile PR consultants, and maintained that Madeleine had been kidnapped. Portuguese authorities named them arguidos, formal suspects, for a time, but no criminal case moved forward. The public was left in limbo. Two competing narratives, one shouted, one whispered. The silence in the courtroom mirrored the silence of that hour, between 9:05 and 10 p.m., the hour where the truth may have died alongside Madeleine. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann gripped the world. Her face, with that distinctive coloboma in her left eye, was printed on posters, billboards, television broadcasts, and the front pages of newspapers across continents. She became the most recognized missing child since Eton Pat's. At first, the world rallied. Celebrities made pleas for her return. International funds were established. The British government extended rare diplomatic support to the McCanns, even dispatching high-level officials to liaise with Portuguese authorities. It seemed like everyone wanted to help find Madeleine. But as the months dragged on, sympathy gave way to skepticism. Questions about the McCanns' version of events grew louder, not from conspiracy theorists, but from independent journalists, forensic experts, and investigators who reviewed the case with a clinical eye. Why was there no evidence of a break-in? Why did the dogs alert to the scent of death inside their apartment and car? Why did key items, like a large tennis bag Jerry had used daily, suddenly vanish? Social media became a battleground. On one side, supporters who believed the McCanns were victims of a tragic crime. On the other, those who believed the tragedy was real, but not the narrative. The Portuguese police were caught in the middle. Under intense media pressure and diplomatic scrutiny, they eventually removed lead investigator Gonçalo Amaral. When he later published a book outlining the theory that Madeleine had died in the apartment and her parents had concealed the death, the McCanns sued him for defamation. The lawsuit failed. The book was reinstated, but the damage was done, not just to reputations, but to public trust. Online forums lit up with theories. Television documentaries dissected every moment of May 3rd. Anniversary specials re-examined old clues. But with every passing year, something darker began to settle. Not closure, but a fog. A fog thickened by polished PR, unanswered questions, and a system that seemed more invested in managing optics than in uncovering truth. For many, the silence around the case became its own character. Powerful, deliberate, suffocating. It wasn't just that Madeleine was gone. It was that, somehow, the truth had been buried with her. And still, there was no body, no trial, no justice. No. What if Madeleine McCann never left apartment 5A alive? What if the tragedy of that night wasn't a kidnapping, but an accident, followed by a desperate decision to hide, to protect, to survive? We may never know the full truth, but the details remain. The blood beneath the tiles, the dogs that smelled death, the hour of silence that no one could explain, and the car that carried secrets weeks after the world had already turned its gaze. If Madeleine died that night, and if someone chose silence over truth, then this is no longer just a missing person case. It becomes something else entirely. A story not only about loss, but about concealment. About how power, image, and fear can twist justice into something unrecognizable. The cost of a cover-up isn't just the truth. It's the erosion of our belief that truth matters at all. Nearly 2 decades have passed, and still, there is no answer to the most important question. Where is Madeleine McCann? If someone knows, and they remain silent, then justice has already been denied, not only to her, but to every child who vanishes and is never seen again. We owe her more than hashtags and headlines. We owe her honesty. We owe her the truth. And if that truth was buried just steps away from apartment 5A, then it's not too late to unearth it. If this story moved you, share it. Speak her name. Keep asking the hard questions. Because silence isn't just absence. Sometimes silence is a choice.